Hello everyone and welcome back to that one playthrough of Kerbal Space Program, the JNSQ playthrough. I am Kyle once again, and you're joining us right in the middle of a launch here. I'm going to go ahead and sit tight for just a second because it's going to get loud. Yeah, there's some good engine noises right there. Okay, bring the sound down a little bit. Yeah, this is the Val 1B. We've already done some tests with the Val 1 in previous launches. The B iteration here has a little bit more battery space, and you'll also notice we have Jeb on board. This is a manned mission this time around. Yes, this is the Val 1B-2, the second mission in total. So the last one, obviously, we did some tests to make sure that it had the capability of going deep into space. We did this as a little flyby mission of Minmus, because we knew we had the Delta V to do that, and that would just prove that it was capable of doing a flyby and lunar entry orbit of the moon, which is what this mission is going to do. So pretty standard operating procedures thus far here. We got our second stage going. We'll get lined up here with that maneuver node and then fire away to put us into a nice circular orbit so Jeb can be on his way. This booster stage here is going to take us all the way to the moon, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it helps with some of the circularization as well. But yeah, look at that good shot right there. Got our vehicle nice and in orbit there. Jeb's gonna have some fun floating around for a little bit. Maybe do some small experiments in the cockpit itself there. But yes, this is mostly gonna be doing a preliminary mission first. So we're actually gonna cut away from this, and there's some very important stuff we've got to get to while Jeb gets situated before we send him on his way to the moon. Yes, we've got to do a quick little engine test here, and this is very important, so I need you all to pay attention and listen very carefully. See, this is going to be utilized forward as our main primary stage for entry-level missions into wherever we got to go doing defense and stuff, and that's what's most important is stuff. That's really stuffy and stuff and stuff. If we don't have enough stuff, then we have a problem. And that's why we need to make sure that these things don't fail, and that this will actually help us in those missions I just mentioned going forward. And this right here is one of those missions. So this is our brand new first stage engine, much more powerful. It's I think it's 750 kilonewtons of thrust, which is like way more powerful. Maybe it's 500 kilo. I can't remember. I'll have to double check all the numbers here because I'm just going to make myself sound like an idiot mostly. But this is for a contract to dock 2 vessels in orbit of Kerbin, which is necessary for a couple of reasons. One, obviously having the contract completed will give us a good substantial amount of cash. Number 2, it will start to open up the doorway to creating stations in orbit, which is some additional contracts that'll come into place once we complete this contract. Now, this is labeled as the Agena. Now, if you are aware of the Mercury, or not, sorry, rather, not the Mercury, but the Gemini program. The Gemini program actually did the first orbital docking maneuvers with the Agena craft historically in the US space program. However, the contract here forced me to label this as the Agena, probably because whoever made the contract mod decided that was cool. So that's what we had to do, and that's why this is called the Agena. Now in the cockpit here, we've got Ned and Kerman, who is the pilot we accidentally hired a few episodes back. So he's actually getting some use now, which is good. He will not only be a part of this contract to put this into orbit and have it dock, which is what we're going to start commencing now, but he's also going to rank up to a rank 1 pilot, which is good, which is something I needed him to do anyways. We're kind of flying semi-blind with less control than a level 1 pilot, but he seems up for the task thus far. So here I'm just kind of fidgeting with maneuver nodes, as one does when you're trying to get one of these really articulate rendezvous positions. And I think I got this down to like half a kilometer. And then I kind of burned a little bit more after this point, kind of finagled again to get it down. I think I got eventually down to like 0.1 kilometers, which is pretty good when it comes to rendezvous. Yeah, there it's pretty close. And then you can see here we've got the vehicle in sight. So I'm going to start doing some targeted burns. So my target is now the other vehicle that Jet is on, the Val 1. And we're just going to kind of cruise in nice and slow here. Nice and slow. That was the Val 1 loading in. There was that little lag. Moving pretty slow. Of course, this is also sped up, so it doesn't quite go as slow as I was doing. I was moving at probably 10 meters per second for most of it, and then when we get closer, I'm down to about a meter per second, I think it was. Yeah, 0.9 or so. So once we get close, use the RCS to kind of slow us down completely. Flip to the Val 1, the JED's on. Make sure we align our docking ports as targets. And then I just flip it around, point it toward the other vehicle, switch back to Nedin. He goes and points toward Jed's vehicle. And then we very slowly creep in here with the RCS. And then we get a nice little slow motion dock here. This is in real time right here. That's how slow we were moving. Any second now. And boom. We have our first successful docking in orbit of Kerbin. And this is going to be useful for a number of reasons. As we can see, we get some milestone accomplishments, as well as we'll complete that contract. So these are all huge bonuses. Now, there's not as much value to these because we have that contract, or not the contract, but the administration policy to do things around min-miss currently, which is kind of one of our goals, is to do some probe work around min-miss. But nonetheless, there's still some good value, some good science, and there's that contract completion there. Big giant chunk of cash, always useful. So yeah, then we get Nedin up to level 1 when he returns, and then Jed's going to continue on with the rest of his mission. So we'll do the contract with Jed to actually return from orbit of the moon. We also did this contract, so that vehicle serves two purposes, which is something I really, really like to do. And then Nedin has a nice, easy return through the atmosphere here. Nothing spectacular. A little failure, I think, here was the, might have been reaction controls on the core of the probe there. Not the probe, but the command pod, rather. And then some lovely ice caps around the equator of Kerbin, as we've struggled comprehending in the past, and I still have an issue. Gather some quick science here. There was a couple things, crew reports and whatnot, I hadn't done from this ocean, apparently, so I grabbed those real quick. And then we'll return back to the Space Center real quick, and then back up to Jed. So with Jed, yeah, we're just going to do a nice easy maneuver node toward the moon. This is a little on the risky side when you think about the fact that we're playing with failure mods, because I only have one engine on here. Well, there's this engine, and then there's the engine in the next stage. But both of these, because they only have the one engine in each stage, if the engine were to fail, I'd kind of be, you know, SOL, as one might say. But I was feeling pretty confident. This is a pretty cool shot here. Just kind of some cool, majestic engine expansion, the engine burn. Out the back was pretty colorful and beautiful to look at for a second there. So we get lined up with the moon here. We're going to get a flyby, just as we planned. I line that up, get it pretty close. Carry on our way, orient the craft kind of north-south relative to Kerbin, so that way those solar panels are always touching. And there's a few little bits of science I guess I didn't capture before in terms of crew reports, so I grabbed that real quick. And then we're going to shift on over our attention to our rover, the Wanderer 1. Now, you'll notice this is missing a wheel, because I loaded the craft at one point and the wheel exploded. So now, unfortunately, we're dealing with a tricycle. It still drives fairly well, but it has also arrived here finally at the destination we set in the last episode, so we're going to be able to gather some science from this biome. So we'll make sure to grab our temperature scan, our barometer scan, getting that pressure scan, and then making sure that we do a scan of seismics. There we go. That's what I'm thinking of. The vibrations in the surface of the moon, which is not seismically active, as far as I know. Is that the right word? Seismically? I don't know. Regardless, though, we'll capture some science, get what we need here, and then in order to kind of squeeze this thing dry as far as we can, I'm gonna set another destination here. Basically, try to get to another biome. So I'm gonna select one of these more specific crater regions, just because JNSQ's moon is slightly different. So it doesn't just have the big giant craters like Vanilla does. It's got some slightly different ones. So we'll set that as a destination. What I'm gonna do here is drive around a little bit, get a feel for this, see if it can still move, and it does. Like I said, it's got some decent control. It still slides around a little bit, like it's on ice, which is sort of awkward, but yeah. I'm going to try and run into some rocks because I made it so that the parallax mod now has collisions. Now some of them I just go through like that one. I think the small ones don't have collisions, so at first I thought, oh no, it's not working, but then I ran into this one and it was working, so that was good. So then I decided, okay, let's try the big one. You know, if the little ones don't always have collision, the big ones might. It might be fun. So I try to see if I can drive through this one on the left, and the result is solid object, which is awesome because this does two things. One, it makes it more challenging. It also makes it a little more exciting to drive around too. So now when we actually go to land on these surfaces with vehicles and, you know, actually try to kick Kerbals to the surface, it'll be a lot more difficult. And that's what I'm all about. I kind of got it stuck here for a second and had to figure out if it was going to be salvageable. And I thought, oh, my rover's gone. We've lost it. But then kind of did a little three-point turn, came back off the surface of that rock, did a little wheelie up in front, as one does with their rovers, turned it back around, and carried on our wayward son. Now, at this point I kind of thought, okay, well, I don't really need to do too much else, so we can probably leave this be and let it carry on its way to its next destination. I'd let it kind of drift a little bit forward, trying to see if I could get some more control function out of it, but 'twas not the case. So this rover, while it is fun to drive, will probably get most of its use going forward, just kind of setting destinations on the Bon Voyage mod, which is what I'm doing here, setting that, getting the waypoint, making sure it's good to go, set it to go to that destination, and then we can leave our rover behind and it'll drive itself. And then we can go ahead and shift right on back over to the Val 1, take a look at Jeb here, and watch him as he carries on his way toward the moon. We had a little bit of a malfunction here with our reaction control and whatnot, but nonetheless, we still have plenty of life support, so there's nothing really to worry about there. The actual command pod, though, does end up, if it does lose reaction control as well as battery, it became a little stressful later on as we went through this. We get finally in the sphere of influence of the moon, plan our next maneuver node so we can get an orbit of it, and then while I'm kind of hovering up here at higher altitudes, we're going to collect some high moon science here. Very important stuff. So we have Jed pop out. He's going to do a little EVA report, because we did collect this with the last mission that we sent Kerbals in orbit of the moon. However, we don't talk about that mission anymore. Moving forward, Jed goes ahead and collects all the things he needs to collect. We do a little mystery goo, we do some EVA, we do some crew report. Jeb gets back on board. We're gonna speed up the process here, head into that maneuver node, get into a nice circular orbit, nice and low here, just about 30 kilometers or so from the surface of the moon. Get rid of that previous stage, and then we use our main little kind of maneuvering vacuum engine here. That is the Terrier engine, super efficient, super efficient. And then Jeb can do what he came here to do, which is gather some science from low moon orbit and kind of help plan out the rest of Kerbal Kind's adventures in regards to lunar missions. So he's going to go ahead, collect that science here in a second. It's a pretty shot. The moon looks really nice with the parallax mod. And at the point of recording this voiceover, Kerbal Space Program 2 is actually out, and I gotta say, looks pretty good in terms of visuals. The game runs pretty well on my machine too, so I might do a video of that coming up not too far in the distant future. It is buggy, of course. It's an early access game. That's to be expected, so if you expected it to be perfect, that's your own fault. Anyways, moving on. Jeb's gathering all the science from low lunar orbit here. A couple of times I got to take the science out of the pod, put it back in, because when you do a crew report from on board, you can't do another one over a different biome unless you remove everything from it, put it back in, so that kind of quote-unquote science spot is back open again. Jed kind of does a little bit of a flying around maneuver. We're going to go ahead and gather the mystery goo science that is in those little mystery goo containers. Gonna grab both of those. Yep, there we go. Good, perfect. And then he's gonna do a little floating around. Kind of become the first Kerbal to do an EVA out here in orbit of the moon. He looks pretty happy about it too. So floating around, doing some Jeb things. Get him back on board. Get all that science stored away in the command pod. That way when he lands, we can have it all. And what I started to notice here too, and I totally forgot this was a thing, but if you're in orbit and you fly over a biome that you don't have an EVA report, and you have a mod that, say, is like Science Here Now that will stop the time warp, you can pop out real quick, grab that science, and you keep grabbing EVA reports. Got a little bit of a milestone there. Always good to grab the extra cash. And then I cycle through and I actually send all the science back to Kerbin that I could get full transmission of, which is not always all the science, but you know, there's some science modules that allow you to do that, which is nice. A few of the ones that you have to return to get more of the value of, I kept those on board, obviously. We do another quick orbit. So Jed was in orbit for maybe 1.5 orbits, which is not that long. Set a maneuver node. We're just going to take him home. There's not really much else he can do here. Spending more time in orbit of the moon doesn't give us any extra value. And with failure mods, I'd rather play it safe. That way I know Jeb's not gonna, you know, die at any point. And then, yeah, here we go. Full on free descent. Down back to Kerbin for our re-entry. And this slowed down. Look at that. That's an eclipse right there passing by. You saw that shadow on Kerbin. I saw that while I was editing. I didn't see it while I was actually recording. But I thought it was fun to kind of point out there as the moon went by in the background, blocking the sun on part of Kerbin. So then, yeah, as we get close here, do a quick little EVA because I realized there was some science I could gather. So even though Jeb is plummeting towards the atmosphere, I figure why not just do some quick science while he's there, and then we'll start using our engine for some small burns. Just to kind of use up some fuel, slow us down a little bit more. This is pretty standard procedure. Now this is where things get a little terrifying. First, that got stuck there a little bit, but then I realized, wait a second, I have no control of the vehicle. I cannot turn it because I lost reaction wheel control. So as this thing starts plummeting and tilting, that glowing red hotness is definitely just that. It's glowing red hotness. So I was questioning whether this thing could reorient itself in time before it got too hot, praying that Jed did not explode and us have some deja vu. And let's just say it was quite relieving to see that it started plummeting in the right direction. So everything was a-okay, and it's a good thing because you can see with JNSQ's orbital velocities, the use of a heat shield is a requirement. Okay, I don't think I've ever seen more than 50 units of a blader be used in vanilla KSP, and this thing is just burning away rapidly. And this explains why that last vehicle just it stood no chance. There was no way it was going to re-enter safely. So had we done some testing prior to the last Kerbal's mission to orbit the moon, we may have saved some lives, but their loss and the sacrifice they've made is what is helping us move forward. So yeah, look at that, like 75% of the ablator gone on a mooner return, which is crazy compared to standard vanilla KSP. So Jed makes it safely back. He's got all that science with him. There's a little crew report I just snagged at the end there too. But yeah, he makes it down to the ground nice and safely. Perfectly successful mission. I think that was another thing of science I just snagged along the way. I don't know what that one was. I don't remember. But yeah, go ahead and land. I think I have him get out. Yeah, he gets out, grabs some more science, grabs surface sample. Bada bing, bada boom. Look at that, Jed. Good job. You made it back. You are the first Kerbal to do so successfully, as we should have just left the job to Jeb to begin with, because, you know, not to judge the last crew, but they didn't quite do all that great a job. But yeah, got some milestones out of this. Perfect. Extra additional cash. The contract completion as well to return from orbit of the moon. We'll see that come through as well. Jeb's going to get back on board and we'll cover this bad boy. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to head back into the R&D building, make sure that we take a look at what we can do on the science side of things real quick. before we end today. Yeah, there's the cash flow coming in from completion of some of those pieces. Yeah, let's go to the R&D building, and then looking through these, we can start to research one of these. I didn't know if I wanted to do more science-based stuff or what. You know, there's a lot of construction pieces we can get. In the end here, what I decided to do, after literally going through every single one of these pieces, because you've got a lot of it to go through, I went with the more efficient vacuum engine. So specifically the Cheetah engine right here, this one is going to be highly efficient compared to what we have. We can use it for booster stages to do kind of orbital transfers. We can also use it for kind of second stages as well. It's really good compared to what we have. So we're going to go ahead and research that, get that working forward, and then yeah, this is about where I'm going to leave you. I'm going to leave you on a little bit of a cliffhanger, actually, because there's a mission that I would like to do regarding some additional plane stuff. We haven't built a plane in a while, so we're going to go ahead and start to do some more of that. So in the next episode, you'll see where this ends up, but the missions we're going to do with some planes are going to be to do some high altitude, high velocity stuff. So we're going to try and hit Mach 2, I believe, is one of the goals we got to hit. We got to do it at level flight, so we're going to need something pretty substantially fast and aggressive, but I'll kind of leave that as a suspenseful moment here, as we're not sure what this new plane's going to look like. It's going to be exciting, but until then, I'm Kyle. This has been that one playthrough of Kerbal Space Program, the JNSQ playthrough, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful day.